Thanks for joining me today. We are going to be extending my discussion in this playlist about a unified approach to switching different instruments in Dorico using more advanced modern sound libraries, and particularly how we can do this in ways that are very different from the traditional key switching approach. Today I'm going to be focusing on the brass section from Berlin Free Orchestra. All of the videos in this short series are going to be oriented around using Berlin Free Orchestra because it's free and it's quite good. But today I'm going to focus on the brass, and what you will notice right away is that I am looking at a project that only has my brass instruments in it. And this introduces an important part of this workflow, which is you want to start building out your switching structure using endpoint projects. So what does that mean? Each project is for an endpoint project. An endpoint is going to ultimately be the thing that Dorico understands connects instruments with expression maps and percussion maps, port settings, all that sort of stuff, makes it all just work. When you load up a viola, you get what you're expecting. That is an endpoint. Now, endpoints, you're going to need one for every single instrument, and you could build one for every single instrument. The problem with that is it's a whole bunch of work. Now, another thing you could do is you could write your orchestral cue, and when you're all done, you've got all your instruments configured and the piece is playing beautifully. You could save an endpoint that represents that composition. And that might be great until on the next composition you needed a glockenspiel and you didn't have that before, right? So the best approach that I can recommend, and this is the approach that I use, are endpoint projects. And this is, again, per instrument family. You'll see over the course of the last video, this video, and the ones coming up in this series, that I organize everything from top down, starting with instrument families: strings, winds, brass, percussion, maybe even hybrid percussion, hybrid synths. You don't have to stay with traditional orchestral instrument families, but start with instrument families. In the last video, I talked about how I assign instruments to ports, and then main articulations to channels, and then articulation variations or add-ons to MIDI CC values. And in order to manage that in an efficient way that's easy to troubleshoot when I've made a mistake, maybe I forgot to implement a particular playing technique on my English horn, for example, it's very helpful if I can go back to an endpoint project, in that case with an English horn, my wind instrument. It's very helpful if I can go back and I can load up a project that just has my wind instruments. It doesn't have percussion, doesn't have pitched percussion, strings, brass. It's just my winds, just the winds that I always use, right? And I go straight into the English horn. I figure out why it's not playing correctly. I fix it there. Probably it's affixed to the expression map. Once I'm done, I resave my endpoint for all the winds. It inherits and kind of shuffles up the pipeline to my playback technique. And from then on, my English horn always works according to plan. So it makes troubleshooting very easy. When I realize there's a problem, I stop what I'm doing. If it's in the bassoon, I'm going to go to winds. I'm going to locate the bassoon. I'm going to fix the problem, resave my endpoint. The endpoint projects are just for troubleshooting and management. They're not for writing music in, okay? So what I've got here to demonstrate today is my endpoint project for brass, and this is for the Berlin Free Orchestra, not the full Berlin series, which is why there's really a more limited set. There's a horn, there's a single horn, a single trumpet, and a single trombone, and then there's horn, trumpet, and trombone ensembles, and a tuba. Unfortunately, none of these instruments in the Berlin Free Orchestra support true legato. On the upper side, it's very easy to make an expression map for them because they don't contain very many articulations. Let's actually look at what articulations they do incorporate. So if I look at my VE Pro is where I'm at here. And in the last video, if you're unclear on why and how I have my ports set up, check out the last video. But just as a sort of a reminder, each instrument here in the brass instance gets its own port, right? Because ports equal instruments. You must always have the channels set to all. That way it can receive all the channel switching that I need to do. And each one also gets an audio stereo pair. And I talked in the last video about how you can configure port numbers. If you don't have enough ports, you have too many, how you can configure audio outputs. That was all in the last video, and I'm not going to go over it again. Here I want to look at Okay, I've loaded up these instruments. What kind of articulations are available to me? So I'm going to go into brass and I'm going to extend this out just so that we can see the full view. And let's go with tuba and the solo trombone. We're just moving up the roster here. And what we find, because this is a free library, it's obviously much more limited. We have sustains and some kind of staccato on each one. We're just going to, even this staccato short, I'm just going to call that staccato. All right, so we've got sustains and staccatos. That's all we have. That's the only options in our brass in the Berlin Free Orchestra, right? So I would go into my planning document over here. I don't need any add-ons yet. I would say that for this one, I'm going to have staccato, and that's it. Since for my strings last week, I set staccato on channel 3 and sustains naturals on channel 1, that's all I need to know. I know my ports here. Let's see, I can fill in my port list. I'm going to fill this in horn ensemble. Then I have solo trumpet, right? Solo horn, just to keep the naming, trumpet ensemble. Then we have solo trombone and trombone ensemble, and then solo tuba. Like that. Okay, so we got solo horn, horn ensemble, solo trumpet, trumpet ensemble, and so on. So we've got 7 ports that we need, right? So we can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ports. Each one's on its own unique port. That's what we have over here. Each one's on its own unique port and has its own unique audio in output pair right there. Okay, so I have that set up inside an instance in VE Pro called BFO Brass. And then I only have 2 articulations, natural, which is going to always be channel 1, and 3 always is going to be staccato. When I'm back in Dorico, and I'm in again my endpoint configuration project, we can see that in the play mode, I only have 1 instance of VE Pro loaded, and that's because I only need to connect to the brass instance in VE Pro. And within there, I can see that I've got all my instruments loaded, 1 port each. Ignore the fact that channel is always 1 here. I know I'm going to be doing channel switching, sending, for example, staccato out channel 3. That just works. The fact that channel is set to 1 here and set to 1 over here in the inspector is fine. The expression map all set to VEP BFO brass. Okay, just wanted to show you. It's okay that this is set to channel 1, but you do want to make sure the ports are set appropriately. Okay, let's take a look at this expression map. So I don't even need legato. In brass, there's none of that available. So I really just have natural, which is sending out channel 1, and staccato on channel 3. Now let's talk a little bit about what these are here. These are, with the little sort of tilde signs, these are a condition-based approach. And we'll talk a bit about this more and more through this series where I'm sort of demystifying this approach. But essentially what I'm doing here is I am using Dorico's expression map conditions, which identify very long notes, medium, short, and very short notes. And then I'm having Dorico play a specific articulation based on the length of the note. This allows me to create just a little bit more nuance and life rather than every note being sustain or every note being, legato. That can get sounding a little old. You'll see how that's been implemented in other situations. But in order to implement these, I do need to use conditions down here, right? So note length equals long, medium, short, very long, very short. But if you double click on one of these, obviously I don't have a playback technique that's called ~d_VS. It just references natural. So essentially it's a natural articulation where the length is very short. And what you'll get there is in the lower zone of, I'm using parlance from Cubase, in the lower zone of Dorico here, if I click into the right mode and I click this note right here, you can actually see the down here in the playing techniques is using my nice label. And this is why I rename them. Let me switch back into desktop and show you. By seeing this label right here, I can be sure which how Dorico is interpreting that note. And that's why I rename it in the expression map so that you can see. Let me switch back in there. So that you can see I've renamed them. If I were to go and create this from scratch, I could just add a new natural, right? And then I can come up here to name and I can rename this, you know, my favorite. And there you go. Now I have that. And as long as it matches all the conditions, aka it's natural and maybe has the note length, then I'm going to see my favorite displayed. Let's just demo that. If I go for, you know, this note is very short, okay? And I click OK. And then we go into the write mode. We come over here. Now, actually, the reason we're seeing very short here is because very short is taking precedence over the other one because it's newer. So let me go actually back to expression maps because I think it's worthwhile to prove this point. If I were to, I'm going to go ahead and delete that and just go ahead and add in little numbers here. So this is CC7 or CC70 value 5. So I'm going to go ahead and just put in a 5 there, just so that it's easy for us to differentiate what we're seeing. Now we can see that my change has showed up here. So by using this naming convention, this tells me it's a detached as opposed to legato, and it's medium or short or very short and long. And I'm going to actually use a unique MIDI CC value of 5 to assign that specific note back in my sign player instance. So if we go back to sign player, and this is where we're going to wrap it up today, you'll see that under channel 1, and we will be going over this more and more in future videos in this series. So I'm trying not to cover everything every time, but instead kind of have a cumulative learning effect here. But what I've got here is unique MIDI CC values. When you load up a group, you can always use CC switches, and then you can choose whatever CC you want for an individual thing. What this means is that when CC 70 has a value of 1, it's going to trigger this. 2 is going to trigger that, so on and so forth. And so my very short, which is triggered with CC value 5, is always going to trigger a staccato short. Even though I don't mark it in my score as staccato, the Dorico engine is going to see that it's very short because of the condition, and it's going to assign it very short. It's going to send it out with the values in the expression map correlating to that. Okay, so that's how I have my brass set up. And the next episode, we're going to focus on winds and then percussion after that, and even more tips in the lessons after that. And all of these videos are going to be sort of pulled together into a playlist so that you can refer back to these anytime you want. Thanks so much for watching. If you are new to the channel and you like this video, please like and please subscribe. You can follow me. I live stream generally twice a week and also publish videos like this about Dorico and Cubase primarily. And I will see you next time in my next episode in this series. Thanks so much.